Welcome back to Building Better Reading Skills for IELTS. We're diving deep into globalization today.
Oh, very interesting. Globalization in education, a pretty hot topic these days.
For sure. We've got a really interesting passage to work with.
Lots to unpack. Should we just jump right in?
Just slowly and clearly so we make sure we understand, each point as we go.
Great.
How about you kick us off?
Sure. Globalization has affected most aspects of our lives. One area which has changed is education.
Okay, so that's pretty straightforward, just setting the stage for what we're going to be exploring.
Right.
I'll take the next sentence. More and more people move to different countries for their studies.
Yeah, we see that all the time, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's becoming so common.
Yeah, and at the same time, there's this other parallel trend happening,
Yeah.
At the same time, more people stay at home and study by distance learning.
Distance learning, yeah, that's where things get interesting.
Yeah,
So you don't have to pack your bags and get on a plane. You can access courses and programs from all around the world.
right, all from your couch.
Exactly.
Yeah, and, technology has been a real game changer here, making it possible to attend those virtual lectures and, collaborate with classmates online and just, access all these vast libraries of digital resources.
It's amazing.
Okay, let's see what this says next. It is now easy to learn without attending a college or university, or attending less often.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So it's not always about replacing traditional education, but it's about just having more options.
Right, and having them fit into your life.
Exactly, fitting into your individual needs.
Yeah, and this text even gives us a name for this approach. Blended learning means studying partly in a traditional way in the classroom and partly online or via email.
Blended learning, I like that.
Yeah.
It's a good way to describe it because it really is taking the best of both worlds
Yeah.
and putting them together.
All right, on to the next sentence. These changes also mean that there is now more interest in lifelong learning. The idea that we go on learning throughout our working lives and even into retirement.
Lifelong learning, that's something I'm very passionate about.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, education doesn't have to end when you graduate. It's a continuous process.
It's about staying curious.
Exactly, staying engaged, constantly adapting
Yeah.
to this changing world.
Yeah, and I think this text even points out that technology is really making it easier than ever. It is easy to attend webinars or online seminars without being away from our offices.
So, those webinars,
Right.
they're fantastic.
So convenient.
You can be sitting at your desk working on a project, take a quick break, attend a live session. It's incredible.
I know, and for people who are juggling, work and family commitments, this is huge.
Huge, yeah.
The text even says, many adults go back to college later in life because it is so easy to get a qualification without giving up work or disrupting family life.
And that word qualification, that's important because it refers to that official recognition you get.
Right.
Whether it's a degree, a certificate, credential.
Showing what you know.
Yeah, and in
Yeah,
this
yeah.
global job market, that's important.
Yeah, it's about demonstrating those skills.
Exactly.
So it feels like this first section is really laying the groundwork for understanding how globalization has, fundamentally reshaped the landscape of education.
It really has.
We've gone from this relatively, static model
Mhm.
centered around physical classrooms, set times, to this much more dynamic, fluid system,
Yeah.
emphasizing choice, accessibility, lifelong learning.
Exactly. It's exciting.
Yeah, and it's not just about those individual learners, but it's also about how these universities and, other educational institutions are having to adapt,
Right.
which I think is a perfect segue into the next section of the text, where we're going to explore how this globalized education is playing out in different parts of the world.
Yeah.
Are the benefits, the challenges, are they shared equally? Let's find out.
Let's do it. So this next section, it really gets into, like the complexities of globalized education,
Okay.
particularly how the impacts are playing out, differently in developed and developing countries.
Right.
It's like we're looking at two sides of the same coin,
Yeah, I like that analogy, two sides of the same coin. Because on the one hand, we've got all these incredible opportunities for learning and exchange, but then on the other hand, there are these real concerns about equity and access.
Exactly. And the text dives right into that. It says, different countries have benefited from the globalization of education in different ways.
All right, so let's start with the positive side.
Okay.
The text mentions, many British, Australian, and American universities run their degree programs in countries throughout Asia.
Yeah, and it's interesting how the text frames this as a valuable opportunity,
Right.
and that it's perceived as beneficial by many students, parents, and employers.
Yeah, it explains how students can get an internationally recognized degree at a much cheaper price than going abroad.
So it's about affordability, accessibility.
Right.
And that phrase, internationally recognized degree, that's key.
All right.
Because it means that qualification, it holds value, it's recognized by employers, institutions around the world.
Yeah. And that can have a huge impact on a student's career.
Absolutely.
I mean, it even says how this can, improve their chances of getting a good job.
For sure. And it's not just the students who benefit, right?
Right.
Those universities that are offering these world-class degrees, they also gain from this exchange.
Yes. The text highlights how they have greater access to ideas and knowledge from all over the world, and having international students enriches their universities.
Exactly.
So on the surface, it kind of seems like a win-win for everyone involved.
Yeah.
But, like we were saying before, we've got to look at the other side of that coin.
Right, because the text takes a bit of a turn here. It states, however, it is not good news for everyone in some developing countries.
Right. So while globalization might be opening doors for some, it could also be, widening the gap between the haves and the have-nots.
Precisely, yeah. And the text goes on to say, many people in rural areas have not even had a primary education.
And then that brings us to this issue of the digital divide. It highlights that also those areas usually do not have reliable internet connections, and most people do not own a computer.
So even if these amazing online learning opportunities exist, they're just out of reach
Right.
for a large portion of the population in these countries.
Yeah, it's like having, a feast laid out before you, but not being able to reach the table.
That's a great way to put it.
And the text kind of acknowledges this. It'll take a bit more time for international opportunities to reach everyone in developing countries.
But time alone isn't really the solution, is it?
Right.
There are these deeper systemic issues that have to be addressed.
Yeah. If we want to make globalized education truly equitable.
Exactly.
And that brings us to, I think, another critical point raised in the text, this potential for westernization.
Ah, yes, westernization. The text really lays this concern out. One concern people have about globalization is that it can start to mean westernization. In other words, local knowledge can be lost and money seen as more important than culture.
So is this globalized education truly global?
Right.
Or is it primarily promoting, Western values and knowledge systems at the expense of others?
Yeah, that's a crucial question to consider.
It is.
And the text argues that education should treat every culture with respect. It should not be just learning about the West, but should include different ways of teaching and approaches from around the world.
Yeah, so it's about creating this, more balanced exchange.
Yeah.
A dialogue, not a monologue.
Right. The text emphasizes this. The aim is to enrich and share. The flow of ideas and information should go from east to west as well as from west to east.
It's not about, erasing differences, but about recognizing and valuing the diversity of knowledge that exists in the world.
Absolutely. Now, this next section takes a look at how universities themselves are adapting to this globalized landscape.
Yeah, they're not just ivory towers anymore, right?
Yeah.
They're having to operate more like businesses in this competitive global market.
Exactly. They're vying for students, for resources, for prestige. Let's see what the text says about this. So it seems like universities are having to, step up their game in this globalized landscape.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah. The text actually says, educational institutions have changed their focus due to globalization.
So how has that focus changed? Like, what are they doing differently?
Well, it says, there are so many benefits of having overseas students that universities are competing for them, using strategies from the world of business.
Oh, so they're having to think more like marketers.
Exactly. They're, visiting education fairs all over the world and spending all this time and money creating publicity material and advertisements.
Wow, that's pretty different from what we think about when we think about universities.
It is, right.
Yeah, and the text points to another important shift. There is also more emphasis on the student experience. There is more focus on customer care, especially helping international students to settle in, improve their English, and understand the academic culture of the host country.
Yeah.
So it's not just about attracting students, but it's also about supporting them.
Yeah, making them feel welcome,
Right.
especially when they're so far from home.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, though, is this focus on customer care a good thing?
Right.
Or does it risk turning education into just another commodity?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I don't think there's an easy answer. On the one hand, it's great that universities are recognizing the needs of these international students.
Yeah.
But, on the other hand, we don't want education to just be about the market.
Right, like meeting those consumer demands.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think it's time to kind of shift our attention to the closing message of this text. Talking about how important it is to make sure that everyone benefits from, the globalization of education.
Right. The text says there are many advantages to the globalization of education and the workplace.
Yeah, and it lists a few, like uh, more people get benefits that were only available to those in the developed countries before. There is more understanding between different nations as people learn about each other's cultures.
Exactly. Yeah, it's very positive.
But it also includes this really important caveat. However, it is important to make sure the benefits reach everyone and don't leave many citizens of the developing world behind.
That's important.
Yeah, it is. It's this powerful reminder that, globalization, while it has all this incredible potential, it also has this risk of, making existing inequalities even worse.
Absolutely. We have to be very mindful of that.
Yeah, it's a call to action, I think, to
Yeah.
make sure that, the opportunities of this interconnected world that we live in are truly shared
Right.
and that we don't leave anyone behind.
Nobody gets left behind.
I think we're ready to move on to some of the specific tasks now.
Sounds good to me. Let's see what challenges await. Okay, so for this next bit, we're going to look at some tasks, kind of like what you might see on the IELTS.
Yeah, get those brains working.
Exactly. So task one, we're going to play a little matching game with vocabulary.
Okay, I like games. How do we play?
Basically, we have a list of words, and we need to find words or phrases in the passage that mean basically the same thing. Synonyms.
Right, like saying big instead of large. Got it.
Exactly. So first up, we have abroad. Take a sec, scan through the passage again, see if you can find a word or phrase that means the same thing.
Okay. Abroad.
Think about what abroad means, going to another country, right?
Right, traveling to a different place. Okay, I think I've got it. To different countries. It's in the first paragraph where it talks about people moving for their studies.
You got it. See, abroad doesn't have to be the exact word. It's about understanding the meaning. What about benefits? That's our next word.
Benefits. Okay, I'm seeing valuable opportunity in the second paragraph where it talks about how some people see international degrees.
Nice. You're getting the hang of this. Benefits, valuable opportunity. They both mean something good, something positive. What about this one, disturbing?
Disturbing. Oh,
Oh,
I think it's disrupting. Right, like in that sentence about family life.
exactly. You're on a roll. How about going to? Think about movement, going somewhere.
Going to. Oh, I see it attending in that first paragraph about going to college.
Perfect. They're both about being present at a place, right? Okay, how about this, make better?
Make better.
Hmm.
I think it's improved their chances, talking about how international degrees can help people get jobs.
You're a natural at this. Make better, improve. Same idea. Two more to go. What about useful?
Useful. Okay, I'm seeing valuable again in that same sentence about international degrees.
You got it. Both mean something is good and worthwhile. And last one, workplaces. This should be easy.
Oh, yeah, workplaces. That's right there at the beginning of the passage. No trick there.
You aced it. You're a vocabulary whiz.
I try. So what's next? Task 2.
You got it. Now we're going to zoom out and look at the big picture. We've got 7 sentences, and we need to pick the 4 that best sum up the whole passage.
Okay, so we're looking for the main ideas, not just random facts.
Exactly what the author really wants us to remember. So first sentence, there are both advantages and disadvantages to the globalization of education. What do you think?
Yeah, that's totally a main idea. The whole passage was about the good and bad, right?
Right. Okay, second sentence. Many people study after retirement.
I don't know about that one.
Yeah.
The passage talked about lifelong learning, but it didn't focus on people studying after retirement specifically.
You're right, it's a bit too specific. What about it is important that globalization should not be westernization?
Oh, yeah, that was a big one. The author was really concerned about respecting different cultures and not letting Western values take over.
Exactly. Definitely a main idea. Okay, next up. Universities have had to become more business focused.
That was a big point, too, like with the education fairs and marketing.
Yeah.
Definitely a main idea.
Okay, how about university fees rose dramatically in the UK in 2012?
I don't remember that in the passage at all. Sounds made up to me.
Good catch. Always be suspicious of information that wasn't directly in the passage. Okay, many poorer people in developing countries do not benefit from globalization. What do you think?
Oh, that's definitely a main idea. It's about that inequality we were talking about earlier. Not everyone benefits equally.
Yep, spot on. Last one. Most lecturers work part-time.
Again, I don't remember anything about that in the passage. Seems kind of random.
Right, totally off topic. So we've got our four main ideas. Globalization has pros and cons. It shouldn't mean erasing cultures. Universities are acting more like businesses. And not everyone benefits, especially in developing countries.
Wow, it's kind of like a puzzle, all these ideas fitting together.
Right, it's complex stuff, but you're doing great at unpacking it all. Ready to move on to task 3?
Bring it on. All right, task 3. What's the challenge this time?
This one's all about digging a little deeper. We've got 3 questions, and they're going to make you think, not just remembering the facts, but really understanding them.
Ooh, I like that. A good brain workout. Hit me with the first question.
Okay, first up, who benefits from globalized education in developing countries? Think back to what we talked about earlier.
Yeah, about how it's not a level playing field, right?
Exactly. So who are the ones who are really reaping the rewards?
I mean, the passage was pretty clear about that. It's mostly the wealthier people, the ones in the big cities who have access to international education. A lot of people in rural areas are missing out completely.
That's a key point, that access isn't equal. All right, question 2. What is the meaning of westernization? We touched on this earlier, but it's worth exploring a bit more.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tricky concept. I mean, it's not just about learning about Western countries, right?
Right, it's more nuanced than that.
It's about the worry that globalization could lead to this kind of cultural dominance, where Western ideas and values overshadow everything else,
Exactly. It's like, does globalization mean everyone has to become westernized?
which, of course, isn't what we want. Diversity is important.
Absolutely. Okay, last question for task 3. How has the focus of educational institutions changed?
Well, for one thing, they're acting a lot more like businesses these days.
In what way?
Think about those education fairs and all the marketing they're doing. They're competing for students, just like companies compete for customers.
It's a whole new landscape, isn't it?
And the emphasis on customer care, like they're trying to create this whole experience for students.
It's interesting, right? Because it can be a good thing, providing more support for students, but it also raises questions about the purpose of education.
Right, like is it about providing a service or something more than that?
Hmm.
Lots to think about. Okay, I'm ready for task 4. Lay it on me.
All right, multiple choice time. We've got 3 questions. You've got to pick the best answer based on what the passage said. Ready for the first one?
Hit me.
Who benefits from globalized education in developing countries? Think back to what we just discussed.
Okay, so we know it's not everyone, right?
Right. So what's the most accurate answer?
It has to be mainly well-off people in big towns. That's what the passage said.
You got it. Second question. What is the meaning of westernization?
This one's a bit more conceptual.
Remember, it's about the potential for dominance, for one culture overshadowing others.
Okay, so it's not just about learning about the West. It's about the risk of a single cultural perspective becoming too powerful. So the answer is learning only about the West.
Nailed it. Last one. How has the focus of educational institutions changed? What stood out to you about how universities are operating now?
Well, it's all about attracting students, right? They're acting like businesses, competing for enrollment.
And that's reflected in how they're marketing themselves and the services they provide.
Exactly. So the answer is they are focused on attracting students.
3 for 3. You're on fire.
Huh. Thanks. You know, it's amazing how much we covered in just this one deep dive.
I know, right? We talked about blended learning, lifelong learning, westernization, the digital divide.
And the whole idea of universities becoming more like businesses, it really makes you think about the future of education, doesn't it?
It does, and it's something that affects all of us no matter where we are in the world.
That's so true. Well, before we go, I think it's time for a quick vocabulary recap.
Great idea. Let's refresh our memories on some of those key terms we encountered today. Ready?
Bring it on.
First up, globalization. It's that big overarching force that's changing so much about our world.
Including education. And speaking of which, distance learning has become a major part of the educational landscape,
And then there's blended learning, that mix of online and offline.
which ties into lifelong learning, the idea that we're always learning no matter our age.
And we can't forget about webinars, those online seminars that make learning accessible from anywhere.
The passage also talked about the elite, those who often have greater access to opportunities, especially in developing countries.
And then there's westernization, that concern about the potential for one culture to dominate others.
We also learn about education fairs, where universities are showcasing themselves to prospective students.
And finally, customer care, that focus on providing a positive experience for students, almost like they're customers.
Wow, that's a lot of vocabulary. But it all connects back to this bigger conversation about the globalization of education.
It does, and it's a conversation that's just beginning. We're all still figuring out how to navigate this new world.
That's for sure. Well, this has been a really fascinating discussion. I really appreciate you taking the time to, share your insights with me.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And to all of you listening, thank you so much for joining us on the deep dive. We hope this exploration into globalized education has given you a lot to think about. And until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep exploring.
Happy learning.